As we know it, Collingwood managed to dig themselves out of that deep hole at the start of the season where they started 0-3. And I think there's a bit of a trend that Collingwood need to attend to in the back half of this season. Otherwise, I don't think Collingwood can win the flag. As it stands, Collingwood are currently 14th in the league for scores from defensive half transitions. And that's only ahead of teams like Richmond, West Coast and North Melbourne. The number one team, take a wild guess, the Sydney Swans. Now I know most of you are going to be saying, well Anthony, it's just a stat, you can't just rely on one stat and isolate that. It's a reductionist sort of way to interpret things. And usually I can vouch for that. But if you look at the last 3 years, being 2023, the number one team, the premiership side, Collingwood was the number one side for points from defensive half transition differential between themselves and the opposition. 2022, Geelong ended up being the premiers. They were the number one side when it came to differential in points from defensive half transition. We go as far back to Melbourne, who didn't score a lot, but while they kept their opposition at bay, a lot of their score sources came from defensive half, and that's why they were also the number one team scoring points from defensive half in 2021 relative to their opposition. And that is my cause for concern when it comes to this stat, and that's as far back as it goes. So I'd like to know what 2020 holds, 2019, 2018, so on and so forth. But those stats alone just indicate that maybe we have a slight problem brewing at Collingwood. The next question you're probably wondering is, why has there been a significant drop-off where Collingwood were averaging 40 points scoring from defensive half last season compared to right now where we sit at a measly 28.9 points. A drastic turnaround. And I think it largely has to do with the change of positional roles and acquisitions. You've got Nick Dacos and Jack Crisp, who basically lived off the halfback flanks last season, and then you sprinkle in a bit of John Noble, Braden Maynard, Isaac Quaynord, so on and so forth. That hasn't happened this year, especially as of the last 6-7 games with all the injuries. You've seen Nick Dacos adopt the full-time role in the midfield, along with Jack Crisp, who is having a Copeland Trophy-like year so far. So for me, that's a big issue. You almost rob Peter to pay Paul in a sense. You move your best players at the halfback flankers who've got the ball moving all the way around last year into the middle and try to change our scoring profile while not trying to hurt the defensive half transition element too much. But when you replace Jack Crisp and Nick Dacos with, and I say this as kindly as possible, you replace them with players like John Noble, Steele Sidebottom, Tau Jath, as most recently, of course, against North Melbourne, these players aren't to the level of what Jack Crisp and Nick Dacos can accomplish off the halfback flank. So there is that transitional period. Where can we get that moving forward? I'm not too sure. I think we just need to keep hoping and praying that players like Noble and Quaynor maybe takes more of an offensive role moving out of the back. That's probably our best bet outside of Nick Dacos or Jack Crisp returning to the role. So how have Collingwood managed to win all these games despite this monumental drop-off in the defensive half game? I think the glaringly obvious linchpin in Collingwood's game throughout this season has been our ability to score heavily from stoppages, whether it be out of the centre bounce or around the grounds. We've been a top four side for the entirety of the season for that stat, so that's a massive one. And just even more recently, the last 5 matches, we're the number one side for least scoring shots conceded per inside 50. So we're slowly regathering our defensive profile that obviously helped us with our push to the premiership last year. Our offensive profile is still not quite there. We're middle of the pack as it stands. But those are some of the other important factors that has held Collingwood in good stead in 2024. Now, I must extend that conversation regarding solutions about how we approach this moving forward. It's not all doom and gloom for Collingwood at this point. In the last 5 matches, Collingwood are also returning to this defensive half transition game, most notably against North Melbourne, and we'll get to that in a moment. Collingwood are finally in the green when it comes to their scores from defensive half transition relative to the opposition. They're 6th in the league in that differential stat in the last 5 matches. And clearly it's a matter of just having that synergy from defence to midfield to forward, of course, and that ultimately gets you the goals and registers points from that score source. The other thing is with North Melbourne, It was a massive breakout game for Collingwood. I said before the game, Collingwood needed to bring the heat to a team like North Melbourne, who concede a whole lot from defensive half transition as well as turnover. We were playing at Marvel under the roof. It's a Sunday against a team that we need to beat, and we end up scoring over 60 points from defensive half against North Melbourne while keeping them only to 19 points. The majority of their goals came from forward half and turnover, as well as centre bounce. But the real positive was the fact that we could rekindle this relationship with being able to move the ball from one end to the other. And that was a pretty feature of last year. Even in 2022, we set the tone. I think we were one of the top 4 sides back then for defensive half transition. So that's my case that I've made regarding what we need to fix to ensure that we can have another tilt at the flag and keep up against teams like Carlton and Sydney. I don't know, my crazy solution, if Collingwood can't return to the form of last year and the year before when it comes to the transition game, maybe we could try Josh Dacos in a half-back flank position. We know how well he uses the ball. He's a winger, so he understands how to, I guess, position himself defensively. And we've got plenty of depth in the wing position. You could still have Steele Sidebottom, Patrick Lipinski and Harvey Harrison rotating through the wing spots to allow for Josh Dacos to have that role in that half-back flank position. And obviously he shares the name Dacos, and we know how good Nick Dacos was at half-back flank last season. Almost won the Brownlow coming off the half-back flank, which is unheard of. So that's probably my experiment suggestion if we really struggle to burst out of our seams when it comes to scoring from that source. We just can't be around teams like North Melbourne, Richmond and West Coast when it comes to this conversation. Otherwise, we're just zero chance, in my opinion, for a premiership tilt. There will be a point that Collingwood need to decide, okay, we have to put one of our top 5 best players in the team in the half-back flank position. You look at Sydney, they've got Nick Blakey coming off the half-back flank. You look at St Kilda, they got Wanganang Malira coming off the half-back flank. Look, Carlton, you could probably say Adam Sard and Jordan Boyd are within that conversation. And then Adelaide, you got Mitchell Hinge. So we don't have, in my opinion, I don't think we have players to that ability on our half-back flank. I think Nobles can be inconsistent from time to time. I would love for him to be that player, but I think someone like a Josh Dacos would be a perfect player in tandem to work with John Noble moving forward. Now, obviously, North Melbourne are the worst side to defend scores from defensive half. We come up against Gold Coast after this bye, who are a top 6 side for defending that score. So it'll be a new challenge for Collingwood at Gold Coast's fortress, where they remain undefeated. So it'll be a new challenge Collingwood will relish and need to overcome and continue to build our strength in that game against North Melbourne, where we scored 60 points from that score source being defensive half. Right after that, we roll back down to the bottom of the table again, where Essendon are in the bottom 5 for being able to defend points from defensive half. So then again, another opportunity where Collingwood can hopefully build on this confidence that we've found against North Melbourne, hopefully taking something from Gold Coast and beating them away, and then doing what we can do against Essendon with our ball movement. So I know this has been a bit of a ramble on a video, but I've just wanted to highlight this. I want to get your thoughts. What are the solutions? Why do you guys think this has happened this year? Do you guys think it's as big as an issue as I do, considering the last 3 premiership teams were #1 in that stat source? Let me know in the comment section, guys. See ya.